Yo guys, what is up? Here we are with another reading video, and today we are on chapters 10 and 11 of The Boys Who Challenged Hitler by Philip Hoos. Let's just get right into it. Anyway, I already failed trying to make this once. I forgot it. Apparently I didn't hit the record button correctly. So, that's always fun. Chapter 10, Grenades. Though the Wirtschmidt's hobnailed boots echoed through Aalborg streets, though a blue cloud of gasoline and oil from German transport wagons hung over the city, though Ijo's sister insisted that detectives were but a breath away from the Churchill Club, it was still spring. The air had warmed and the days were long and bright at last. The oldest cathedral school students were just a few days from graduation. Helge, Ijo, Nud, and the professor would be moving into high school at last, if they could pass their finals. The young saboteurs kept up their resistance work even as they crammed for exams. Classmates had no clue what was going on. Instructors constantly reminded students that they were growing in experience and responsibility. The instructors had no idea how right they were, at least for a few of them. A bright spot was that the Churchill Club suddenly acquired 3 important new allies, thanks to Ulf Darkett. Every few evenings, Ulf rode his bike downtown to attend meetings of a model airplane building hobby club. One night, as he carved his parts and glued them together, Ulf fell into conversation with another plane builder named Alf Holberg. Alf, his brother Kaj, and their friend Nud Hornbo were in their early 20s, factory workers from the nearby town of Bronderslev. They were all devoted to model airplanes. They kept chatting as they worked, until, after a time, Ulf took a chance and revealed his activities with the Churchill Club to Alf. Far from being shocked, Alf replied that the 3 of them shared Ulf's disgust with the Danish authorities in this crisis. In fact, they had just stolen 6 mortar grenades from the railway station near their factory. Problem was, they couldn't figure out how to make the bloody things work. Would the Churchill Club be able to use them? Nud Peterson. My brother brought the mortar rounds to the monastery in 2 heavy cases Ulf had given him. He was carrying them very carefully. The only thing I had ever heard about mortar grenades was that they exploded on contact. I told Jens to set them down on the bed gently. He accidentally nicked the bedpost with one of them, and our hearts about stopped. We lifted the lids. Inside each box were 3 objects that looked like iron bowling pins with wire caps smeared with fat. As usual, we didn't know how to operate them. And as always, there was no one to teach us. Jens and the professor immediately started to tinker with them in the professor's lab above Jens' room. The first idea was to take one of the grenades apart on the table and empty the explosive powder from it. But when they got all the parts spread out, they found that there was no powder inside. It was puzzling. The only thing we could figure out was that Alf and his mates must have stolen practice grenades. Dummies, not live munitions. The professor and Jens resumed experimenting with the grenade components, inspecting them, combining them, turning them over and over, trying to make something happen. Then at the bottom of the grenade, they found something interesting. A thin metal disc of 7 or 8 centimeters, held in place by a set of screws. Something about that disc just looked flammable. A match to the disc lit the professor's lab up like 7 suns. They were yelling bloody murder, and the rest of us came running in with water. It took at least a minute to extinguish the flames. Through the heavy smoke, the 2 great scientists were grinning like the triumphant fools they were. The 2 kept working. They came to realize that the discs themselves were made of highly flammable magnesium. All they had to do was light one with a match, and they had a compact firebomb. I didn't know how we lived through those tests. Jens and Professor were world champions in near-suicidal experiments with explosives. But this time they figured out how to control the materials. At last, the Professor had made a weapon that worked. It was a big step, for grenades brought a powerful dream within reach. Now we could stage raids of our own. We set aside 2 grenades for our ultimate mission, destroying the German vehicles that lined the streets of Adolphi Square outside my window. At last we had the force to make it happen. Well, maybe not exactly like my fantasy, where I came racing into the square with guns blazing and caught sight of Greth in the tower, but at least the Nazi fighting heart of it. Now we had the firepower to mount a serious assault. But first a field test. When the darkness fell, on the evening of May 2nd, 1942, 5 of us biked to the Aalborg rail yards, a hub of Nazi activity in Aalborg. It was a city of boxcars lined up in rusted strings. Some containers were filled with ore from Norway and Sweden. Others were loaded with machine parts and components. Still others contained materials from the rapidly expanding Aalborg airport. The yard, lit with floodlights, screeched with the clamor of groaning engines and banging doors and wheels scraping on iron rails. Tonight's mission was to use our new grenades to ignite boxcars and destroy their contents. We had high hopes. A chain-link fence patrolled by 2 armed guards kept the public away from the rail yard. A footpath ran in front of the fence. One of us would remain on the path as a sentry, chatting with the guards if necessary, clanging an alarm on a metal fence post if something went wrong. The others would cut a hole in the fence and enter the yard. Alf and Oof would take the position beneath the boxcars, each with a pistol trained on a guard. I and one other would go to work on the freight cars with the grenades. As we crept toward the post, we met a problem we hadn't counted on. A pair of lovers positioned themselves at one end of the path and were furiously making out. How could we flush them out without explaining why we wanted them to leave? We moved up close and stared, eyes wide, mimicking them. With middle fingers raised in farewell, they left for a more private place. Let's be nice to each other, people. Try not to flip each other off. We cut the fence and took our positions. Oof slid underneath the boxcar and aimed his pistol at a guard. Another clubber and I set to work picking out a likely boxcar to ignite. We walked to the middle of a train, figuring it would be harder for Germans to extract a Fleming boxcar from the middle than just to uncouple one at the front or the back. The first rusty iron door screamed when I pulled it back. My eyes adjusted, and yes, it was full of airplane wings. Better. There were paper drawings showing how to attach the wings to the fuselage of a plane. It was a jackpot target of tremendous value to the Nazis. I bunched up the pile of wing assembly instructions and gingerly placed a grenade disc atop the pry. Crouching on the doorway, I lit a match and tossed it backward onto the pile of paper. Flames ignited the disc quicker than I anticipated. The explosion of fire hit me in mid-flight as I leaped from the boxcar. Flames were already consuming the paper and wings when I landed on the ground. My partner did the same to the next boxcar, and we ran crouching toward the fence. I whistled that the operation was complete, and we all squirmed back through the hole we cut in the fence. Just about that time, Borge came huffing in from Nibe on his bicycle, hours after his failed offensive. He was just in time to admire our work. We all backed into the darkness and watched our events play out. Sirens began to scream throughout the city. The German officers rushed past us toward the rail yard. There was a wild, arm-waving discussion between the arriving Danish firemen and the German officers. At first, the Danes refused to go into the area because they feared some of those boxcars contained live ammunition. The Germans, hands on pistol, insisted. Danish firemen started rolling up their hoses, but they moved very slowly, sometimes standing on the hoses once water began to flow. Brandishing their pistols, the Germans shouted at them to move, but it was obvious that the firemen were stalling to let the fire take hold and damage the Third Reich's treasure. This was a moment of significance to us. Danish authorities, the firemen, were standing up to German orders. For the first time in a long while, we felt a stirring of pride in our countrymen. It was our biggest success so far, the destruction of a major German asset. This was the closest we had come yet to a military-style action, one in which we were well armed and had a deployment strategy. It was satisfying to stand there seeing flames lick the night and to witness the discomfort it caused the scrambling Germans. Had we known what was about to come, we would not have been standing around admiring our work. We had already been in motion. Chapter 11. No Turning Back. Ned Peterson. During the first week of May 1942, our nerves were stretched taut. We were elated that we had pulled off the rail yard action, but anxiety mounted as each of sisters warned us that the special security police had identified Cathedral School as the hub of sabotage activity in Halborg. Now we glanced around anxiously wherever we went. We felt or imagined eyes upon us everywhere. We heard footsteps. We lived in an atmosphere of fear. All the tension boiled over one afternoon in Jen's study. Idro demanded through tears that we cease sabotage activity altogether. He accused us of risking the lives of his family since his mother was Jewish. Hitler would stop at nothing to erase the Jewish population. We would feel the same way, he insisted, if we were in his shoes. Jens was moved to support him. Borge and I would hear none of it. We were single-minded. Nothing had changed, we said. Danes were still lapdogs. Germans are still swine. Norwegians still resist. So therefore, we will. We will never turn back. Enough of this. Let us return our attention to the Nazi roadsters lined outside the post office in Medolfi Square. While bright birds sang cheerfully and flowers burst into bloom outside our windows, we stayed inside and tore ourselves apart that afternoon. The club was deeply and bitterly divided. Jens and I nearly came to blows and had to be held apart. Finally, I stormed out with Borge beside me, slamming the door behind us. Jens and the others stayed behind. About 5 o'clock in the afternoon of May 6th, waitress Elsa Austin at Cafe Hull in downtown Aalborg saw two teenage boys enter the restaurant, walking briskly, heads down. They made a beeline for the coat closet and emerged from it a very short time later. They strode straight out of the restaurant without ordering a thing. Looking through the cafe's picture window, Miss Austin saw them talking on the street. A few minutes later, a German officer dining at the cafe discovered that his gun was missing. He'd placed his belt and holster with the pistol inside on a shelf in the cafe's coat closet. After his meal, he went to recover his sidearm and found that the holster was empty. He angrily reported this misfortune to the full restaurant staff, which sparked Miss Austin's memory of the two boys who entered the coat closet. Miss Austin gave a detailed statement to the police. Yes, she'd seen the boys before. Yes, they had been in the restaurants a few times, always preoccupied with the coat closet, never ordering. Several times she'd seen them clustered on their bicycles out in front of the cafe, talking. At least twice she'd seen them peering through their framed figures into the cafe window. One of them, very tall, combed his thick hair with a dramatic upsweep. She thought she could recognize him if she saw him again. Ned Peterson. School let out at 3 on Friday, May 8th. Another week down, just a few days left till summer break. I was walking out through the school gate with Helge, jabbering about something when I caught sight of a sharply dressed gentleman across the street and a lady at his side. Both seemed to be staring straight at us. I'd never seen them before, but their eyes never left us. To create a distraction while I got a better look at them, I pulled my long black comb from my pocket and swept it up through my hair. It was the kiss of death. It's him, Miss Elsa Austin said to her companion. The tall one. I said to Helge, see that guy in the suit we just passed? He's following us. Don't look back. Let's stop for a minute. We stopped. They stopped too, the man staring intently through a grocery store window as though turnips were all that mattered in the world. We sprinted around a corner and stopped again. Moments later, the man came skidding around the same corner and nearly crashed into us. Security police, the man barked. May I see your identification cards? It was an order, not a request. Hours later, the front doorbell rang on the monastery. When our maid opened it a crack, police shuddered through and bowled straight into Jen's room, shouting that he was under arrest. Jens had a fully loaded pistol in his desk drawer, but wisely kept his hands away from it. Where are the weapons? The officer demanded. Jens stood up and led them straight to the cellar to our secret weapons cache. By midnight, they had us all. 11 were arrested, 6 from Cathedral School, plus Borge and Uf from other schools. Borge was soon separated from us because, at 14, he was too young to be imprisoned under Danish law. They also nabbed Alf, Kaj, and Nud, the 3 older factory workers from Bronderslev who had given us the mortar grenades. Police separated us and interviewed us one at a time at the Aalborg police station. Soon every room was chattering with the sound of Remington typewriters taking down the testimony of boys lying through their teeth. The police got even angrier as they tore paper from the rolls, wadded it up, and threatened the suspects with harsher punishments if they continued to lie. 2 cops, the 2 detectives from Copenhagen, led me into an office, pointed to a chair, and shut the door. The subject on their mind was grenades. Where did we get them? Well, I said, I met a fellow during intermission at the movies. He happened to mention that he had some grenades, and I asked if we could use them. What was his name? He didn't mention his name. One of them came across the room, took me up by his shoulders, and slammed me into a wall. Your father is a priest, he shouted, his beet-red face no more than 2 inches from mine. He tells you it is a sin to lie, and you are lying to me. Now, you tell me, boy, what is the name of the person who gave you the grenades? I insisted I didn't know. Well then, what did he look like? I told them. Brown curly hair and brown eyes. That's all I gave them about Alf. One tiny little fact. When we were finished, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I had held my tongue under fierce questioning. Of course, the investigators went to the next captive and asked, what is the name of the guy with brown curly hair who gave you the grenades? Alf, someone said, and so on. Soon, working one boy against another, interviewing them alone, they had Alf's and Kaj's last name and Nud Hornbo's as well. We were interviewed so professionally that we gave them information even as we thought we were clever in concealing it. Also, our stories kept crossing and it was impossible to keep lying. The boys' parents began to arrive in the early evening. Some had been home when the police burst in and hauled their boys briskly away. Others were now just finding out and racing, panic-stricken and confused, to the station. They were received by the police commissioner, an elderly white-haired man named C.L. Buck. Tears of sympathy filled his eyes as he escorted each set of parents to his office and did his best to explain. Ned Peterson. Our parents were mute, speechless, shocked. None of them knew a thing about the Churchill Club and our activities. Their eyes widened as the commissioner told them what their supposedly bridge-playing sons had really been doing over the past 6 months. And the parents did not know each other, which only added to the strangeness of the atmosphere. Some of them, factory owners, doctors, lawyers, the most prominent figures of the city, had never been in a police station before. My parents bustled into the station, formally dressed from a wedding, mother with her pearls and father in his tuxedo. They had been summoned to a phone at the wedding, and, when informed that their sons had been arrested, had made it to the police station within 5 minutes. Though Jens and I were proud of what we had done, standing in front of our country, it was hard to look our parents in the eyes that night. Some parents repeated again and again, "How could you?" but not ours. They cared first and foremost that we were safe and that we had not been treated roughly in the arrest. Jens and I didn't expect that our parents would reprove or punish us for what we had done. They were activists, public people, community leaders who viewed this family misfortune as just one more example of the unhappiness that war brings. As the saying goes, in peacetime the children bury their parents. In wartime, parents bury their children. Surely they were proud of us. Police questioned us all through the night. It was amazing how much information the offer of a single cigarette could produce at midnight when you had been smokeless all day long. At 2 a.m, the police were finally satisfying. There were some actions that we managed to keep hidden, but they got most of it out of us. Each boy had to sign a written statement, still cocky, though we could barely hold our heads up. Some of us with artistic flourishes that swept up over our names. Finally, just before dawn, we were herded into a police van with armed guards and transported to the King Hans Gades Jail, Aalborg City Jail, where we turned in our belongings and were locked into cells. We were given prison gowns and told to place our clothes on a chair outside the cell. My cellmate was Jens. As soon as the guard went away, we went to the window and tried the bars. Thick and square, solidly rooted they were. I laid on a mattress and my eyes soon closed. It would be a long time before I slept as a free man again. And that is the end of chapter 11. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to leave a big thumbs up. I guess you can't comment down below. And don't forget, hit the subscribe button. I'll see you guys in the next video.